Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're tackling a process that has honestly caused a ton of headaches for developers in the past. But it absolutely doesn't have to. We're going to master Business Central translations. If you've ever spent hours, and I mean literally hours, just trying to figure out how to translate standard reports without getting bogged down in completely unnecessary, overly complex steps, well, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to strip away all that confusion today. We're focusing purely on the most efficient, streamlined workflow out there to get your custom reports localized and ready for your users.
So let's just dive right into this. Here's our 5-part roadmap to get you from frustrated to confident. First, we'll look at the lost translations problem. Then, fast translation file retrieval. Third, the slowest retrieval method, just so you know what to avoid. Fourth, prepping your translation tools. And finally, translating the copied report.
Okay, kicking things off with part 1, the lost translations problem. Let's really pinpoint exactly what's going wrong when we try to customize these standard reports.
Just imagine this scenario for a second. You've got a standard report in Business Central. Let's say it's report 1305, the standard sales order confirmation, right? Now, a customer wants a few tweaks, so you do what we always do. You copy the standard report to customize it. But the very second you do that, all the standard translations, like the German or Spanish captions, they just completely vanish. So why exactly do copied report translations magically disappear? I mean, it totally feels like a bug, but it's actually just how the system's architecture is built.
The real culprit here is something called ID-bound translations. You see, the translation files living inside the base application, they strictly translate based on their specific original object IDs. So think about it. When you copy a standard report and give it a new ID, you've essentially created a brand new report in the eyes of Business Central. Those standard translations, they simply don't apply anymore. You're left with a totally blank slate. And that means we need a really reliable way to pull those standard translations right back into your newly minted custom report. Which brings us to part 2. Fast translation file retrieval. Because before we can translate a single thing, we actually have to get our hands on those base app files.
Now, it's super important to realize that not all retrieval methods are created equal. We essentially have 3 distinct paths here. First up, the AL packages method, which is basically our absolute fastest expressway. Then there's the Docker container method, also a really fast expressway if you happen to already be working in that environment. And finally, the installation DVD, which we affectionately call the slowest scenic route. Since we're all about efficiency today, we're focusing purely on those expressways.
Let's look at the absolute fastest method right now, which is something you can use in almost any scenario, the AL packages route. It's surprisingly simple, actually. First, you just download the AL packages straight from your Business Central instance. Once that's downloaded, right-click that folder and select Reveal in File Explorer. Inside there, you're going to find the base application file. It's specifically named Microsoft_base_application_xyz.app. Now here's the real magic trick. An app file? It's essentially just a compressed archive. You can literally unpack that .app file exactly like you would a regular zip file. Ideally, unzip it into a separate folder just to keep your workspace clean. Open up that unzipped folder and boom, sitting right there is a folder named Translations containing absolutely everything you need. It's incredibly efficient. Now, if your daily workflow relies heavily on Docker, there's an equally fast alternative for you. When you're creating your Business Central Docker container, you simply must ensure you use the includeAL parameter in your PowerShell script. This is absolutely crucial. That specific parameter tells the system to export all objects as AL files. If you did that from the start, you don't even need to unzip anything. You just navigate directly to the path you see here on the screen, C, Program Data, BC Container Helper, Extensions, then your specific container name, and then Translations. The files are just sitting right there waiting for you.
Okay, moving on to part 3, the slowest retrieval method. We're going to take a super brief detour to look at the scenic route, mainly just so you know exactly what to avoid doing.
As the author of our source material, Waldemar Brokowski, hilariously puts it, this is option 3 if you have too much time. And honestly, he hit the nail on the head. This method involves downloading the massive Business Central on-premise installation DVD files. Then you have to extract that giant zip file. Next, you navigate deep into the folders to find applications/baseapp/source, where you'll find another zip file called baseapplication.source.zip. You unpack that second zip file, and finally, you locate the translations. It is a nested extraction nightmare that just eats up your valuable time. So do yourself a favor, stick to the AL packages or Docker methods whenever humanly possible.
All right, on to part 4, prepping your translation tools. Now that we have our files in hand, let's slow things down just a bit and lay out a really clear, step-by-step tutorial to get your software configured.
Here is our 6-step toolkit prep. Step 1. Download a really handy program called PODIT. Once you've got it installed, go into its Preferences, find the Translation Memory tab, and import that base app translation file you just extracted for your target language, let's say German, for example. Step 2. Head over to Visual Studio Code, search for and install the extension XLFFsync by Rob Van Beckham. Step 3. Prepare your AL project by copying your standard report over. Step 4 is simply compiling that project. Step 5 is creating a target file using your new XLFFsync tool. And finally, Step 6 is diving in and doing the actual translation back in PODIT.
I want to pause specifically on Step 3 for a second, preparing your AL project, because honestly, this is where a whole lot of beginners get stuck. In your project's app.json file, you might only have standard features listed in there by default. You absolutely must edit this file to add the translation file feature. If you forget to activate this feature, when you go to compile your project in the next step, a translation file will simply not be generated at all, and your entire workflow just stops dead in its tracks. So double-check the translation file is actually written in that app.json.
And that brings us to the home stretch. Part 5, translating the copied report. Your tools are prepped, your AL project is ready to go. Let's actually make this translation happen.
Now, when you use the XLFsync extension to create new target file, sometimes you might get a really weird error right out of the gate. So pro tip number 1, don't panic. Just use the VS Code command palette to run developer reload window and try it again. Honestly, it usually fixes it instantly. Once your target file is finally created, right-click it and open it externally in PODIT. Pro tip 2, please don't translate manually. Use the pre-translate function in PODIT. It uses that memory file you loaded up earlier. But here is the absolute most important part. Pro tip 3, when the pre-translate dialog box opens, you have to ensure the box for only fill in exact matches is checked. If you leave this unchecked, PODIT is going to try to guess translations and you'll end up with super inaccurate, messy captions in your final report. And finally, if you continue developing your report and decide to add brand new custom text later on down the line, just use the command XLS synchronize translation units in VS Code. That lets you safely update your target file without losing any of your previous hard work.
So by bypassing those incredibly slow methods, extracting your .app files directly, and leveraging XLFsync along with PODIT's exact matching, you've essentially turned a really tedious chore into a rapid, repeatable process. So I'll leave you with this final thought. How will this streamlined, efficiency-first workflow change your approach to future Business Central customizations? Hopefully it gives you the absolute confidence to say yes to those complex localized report requests without even hesitating. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, happy translating!